Amanda Waller is back at it again, and this time she's looking for a way to intentionally isekai herself. As the portal is open, the scientists warn her that the energy levels are too low to sustain it, but she isn't concerned and tells them to just increase the power supply. The scientists are still worried about what will happen if they put too much strain on her, but as far as Amanda is concerned, the girl they are using to open the portal is nothing more than a tool to achieve her goals. Joker and Harley heard about the truck-free isekai opportunity, and they immediately started heading straight for it. Imagine the chaos they could cause if they got some kind of broken ability, but before they get there, Harley pulls the handbrake and tells Joker they should stop for a bit to get a good drinks, because it's always better to go on adventures while drunk. Harley enters the bar, but it's a lot less rowdy than she remembers it being even after she throws a bunch of stolen cash. She immediately knows something is up, so she approaches the bar and asks where Keiichi is, and the bartender says Keiichi is out with a cold. However, Keiichi doesn't exist, so Harley knows this has to be a setup. A fight breaks out, and Harley tells Joker not to come in since it's not safe. Meanwhile, Amanda's portal is beginning to go out of control, but she keeps telling the operators to increase the power output. As Harley's bar fight is still going on, Joker turns the car around and drives straight into the building to get her out of there, but Amanda's military defenses show up and fire missiles at him, so he is forced to retreat. It may be crazy, but his driving skills are no joke. Harley eventually manages to escape the bar and get on top of a nearby roof, but as she's trying to call Joker so he can pick her up, she gets attacked by a blade-wielding samurai. The attacker jumps down to end Harley, and at first Harley is able to hold her own with a baseball bat, but then she gets disarmed, so she is now forced to do nothing but evade the samurai's sword strikes. Harley runs away until she eventually grabs a hold of a metal pipe, but the pipe doesn't turn out to be a good weapon, so she ends up on the ground with the sword pointed at her. But instead of slashing her, the samurai uses the hilt of her sword to knock Harley out. Harley gets taken into custody, but the soldiers couldn't get a hold of Joker, and Harley is glad to hear this. She vows to make it out of here and back to Joker someday, but that not going to be today as she gets knocked out again. Meanwhile, Amanda's portal has gone full critical, and after the explosion, it is officially open. And after achieving her goal, the first thing Amanda does is murder the entire team of scientists. 6 months later, Amanda is at an isolated base to gather unwilling volunteers for her isekai plan. It is a facility housing the supervillains which have been captured over the years, and the prison warden, Wade, tries to talk Amanda out of using supervillains for her plan since there's no telling what might happen if something goes wrong, but Amanda simply shuts the warden up by informing him that she has his Discord chat logs, so unless he wants her to leak them, he had better just do what she says. Wade relents and opens the cell where Harley is being kept, and this must be Norway or something because how is she allowed to have pizza and a television in her cell? Amanda turns the television off and tells Harley to get out because she has a job for her to go on. And while Harley doesn't want to, the guns pointed at her are pretty persuasive, so she begins walking out. But before she leaves, the warden stops her and mentions that she had a deal with him that if he gets her all the stuff she wants, then she would give him the Gluck Gluck 9000, but Harley just kicks him in the nuts and says she would only ever do that for Joker. Harley is subsequently tased and taken out of the cells, and while the warden is grieving over his lost balls, Amanda walks over to him and says he needs to hurry up since she has more prisoners she wants to free. The warden calls her insane for wanting to use such dangerous criminals for her mission, but Amanda was always insane. After Amanda is done, Harley as well as several other prisoners are sent through the portal, and eventually Harley wakes up handcuffed to a bench. The guy next to her asks if she's finally awake, and Harley is upset because she was hoping to hear Joker's voice instead. The guy now complains about getting stuck with a crazy girl on his team, but the guy across from him says that no way to talk to a lady. He thinks they should already know who he is, while Harley thinks he's pretty hot. She has never heard of him before. He's apparently a movie star or something, but he's pissed that they don't recognize him. Besides him is a guy wearing a potato sack in his head, and when they ask about the sack, he just says he is wearing it to hide his ugly face because he is on a mission for peace. Now that everyone on the team has gotten acquainted with one another, the guy that's in charge of them comes in and says they will be arriving at their destination soon. He then plays a message from Amanda saying that 5 of them, along with her agent, are tasked with establishing and protecting a series of bridgeheads that will serve as the framework for research and resource acquisition from uncharted territory. That doesn't sound like an easy mission, and honestly, they're starting to question why they should listen to Amanda in the first place. So she explains that she has planted bombs in their necks, so if they disobey her order, try to escape, or even piss her off, she can make their heads go boom whenever she wants. Even under the threat of exploding, Deadshot still doesn't see a reason to listen to Amanda, so she brings up the fact that she knows he has a daughter, and she could easily go after her instead. Deadshot is enraged and swears he will make Amanda pay if she lays a finger on his daughter, but she says she won't have to as long as he does as he is instructed. Now that everyone is clear on the mission, the agent tells them all that their gear is all in the crates at the back of the plane, so he will remove their handcuffs so that they can all get changed. But before that, Harley mentioned that there were supposed to be 5 of them, so they ask where the last guy is. The agent is about to answer, but then the plane begins to shake as the pilots have been killed somehow. They end up crash landing in the middle of a fantasy battle, and the knights have no idea what's going on, so they decide to go investigate. Meanwhile, in the plane, the team managed to survive the crash landing, but as Harley walks up to the front, it looks like the agent wasn't so lucky. However, she has no reason to care that he died, so she uses a random sword which got lodged in the plane to free herself and head outside to check out their situation. However, as she tries to step on the ground, she nearly falls to her death, but luckily she gets saved by Deadshot at the last second. As the others get themselves free, Pretty Boy tries to open the door on the other side of the plane, but it seems to be stuck, so he transforms his hand and smashes the door. They are all surprised that Pretty Boy is actually a metahuman, but that would explain why he had a special restraining device. As they exit, they are shocked by the world they find themselves in, so they are starting to question if it is even real in the first place. They ask Potato Sack Guy if he knows what's going on, since he seems to believe this is a mission of peace, but he doesn't know anything either. Just then, they see a knight get murdered by a group of orcs nearby, and since they are human as well, the orcs attack them as well. Harley can't understand what the orcs are saying, so Pretty Boy tries to explain to them that they are outsiders and aren't involved in whatever war they are fighting. But the orcs don't understand him either and attempt to kill him immediately. The murderous intent and horrible smell coming from the orcs lets them know that this is all real. The others are still in disbelief, but Harley is ecstatic since this is exactly the kind of adventure she always wanted. Just then, King Shark busts out of the back of the chopper and begins chomping down on the orcs like there's no tomorrow. Meanwhile, Harley begins taking out as many orcs as possible. Potato Sack Guy is also laying waste to the orcs, and with his obsession with peace, we find out that he is actually called Peacemaker. Pretty Boy doesn't want to have to deal with the smelly orcs, so he attempts to run away, but once it is clear he can't escape, he transforms to fight them, and we find out that he is called Clayface. In the middle of all the chaos, Deadshot managed to get to his equipment, so he begins shooting down the orcs one by one. However, there are too many of them, so he decides it would be better to target their leader directly. Deadshot tries to line up a shot, but some of the leader's guards are in the way, so he has to get creative and jumps into the air so he can have a clear shot. And the second the leader is in his sights, he shoots him right between the eyes. With their boss dead, all the orcs get scared and run away. After the fighting is over, the Night Army finally arrives to find out what's going on, and as soon as Clayface sees them, he knows exactly what's going on. He can't explain how it happened, but it's clear that they have been transported to a fantasy world, so he believes they will be treated like summoned heroes. However, they just get locked up in jail. In the fantasy world, the Queen's convoy is passing a war-torn village, and while the villagers plead with her for help since they are starving, she clearly doesn't give a damn about them. Back at the castle, the royal officials are busy watching footage of the battle with the orcs, and they are all convinced that their success is solely due to the Queen taking the time to show up to the battlefield and acting as a cheerleader. Some other, more sensible people in the meeting mention how the Queen didn't do a damn thing to help, and in fact, there are still thousands of citizens starving every day. However, the other officials don't see why they should care about what's happening to the filthy peasants who can't afford the latest Bugatti horse. Just then, the Queen calls for everyone be silent since even if the battle was won, she doesn't consider this a victory at all, not until every last orc in this world has been eradicated. The reasonable knight then speaks up and asks the Queen what she plans to do with the strange people they found. They played a big role in turning the tide in the kingdom's favor, but she disregards that and tells the knight to forget about them and start planning for the next battle. The knight tries to argue that they may be useful assets in the war, but the Queen is having none of it and calls him a coward for trying to use outside help to fight in the war. The Queen calls for the meeting to come to a close, but before she gets up to leave, the Princess Fiona asks for permission to speak. She believes the strange people may be their saviors after all, but the Queen tells her to keep quiet since she already said they are not going to use outside help. With that, the meeting is brought to a close, but the princess still can't come to terms with the situation of the kingdom under her mother's rule. Children are out there fighting over a loaf of bread while she gets a full 5-star meal every day. She chooses not to eat her food in silent protest, but then the knight, Cecil, enters her room and reminds her that starving herself isn't going to help any of the starving people outside no matter how much she does it. Cecil may have terrible judgment when it comes to hairstyles, but Fiona understands that he is right. However, she didn't call him here to lecture her. She called him because she has a favor she would like to ask of him. After they were brought to the prison, Harley wakes up to find all of them placed in cells alongside several captured monsters. Clayface realizes that if they've been left in prison for this long and no one has come to let them out yet, then that must mean they aren't being welcomed as heroes. He is frustrated since they were the only reason that the last battle was won, so by all accounts they should be getting better treatment than this. However, he still thinks he can make this work. For now, their biggest problem is that they are running on a timer since according to what Amanda said, if they are not near the transmitter for more than 72 hours, then the bombs in their necks are going to go off. As of now, it has been 12 hours since they got captured, meaning they have 60 more hours to get back there. Clayface really doesn't like how his fantasy adventure is playing out, but since it has come to this, he decides to put the adventure on hold and leave the prison. The others tell him it's not possible to break down the bars since they were made to hold back monsters, but Clayface never intended to break the bars down, he just slips right through instead. He tells them to wait here while he figures out what to do next, but he does warn that he may be forced to leave them behind as part of his character development. Hearing that Clayface doesn't intend to come back for them, Harley and Deadshot start calling for the guards to capture Clayface, since if they're not getting out, then no one is. The guards immediately spot Clayface and slap some magic handcuffs on him, so now he is no longer able to use his powers. Immediately after this, the guard comes to let all of them out since it's lunchtime, if you can call this food anyway. While they are at the lunch table, Deadshot asks Clayface if he is willing to help them escape as well now, but he answers that he can't escape at all anymore. Thanks to these handcuffs, he can't transform anymore, so they are really stuck here now. Just then, a couple ogres come over to their table and try to kick the group out, so even though Deadshot doesn't understand their language, he has been to prison enough times to know what they are trying to do, and he's not going to let them have their way. However, before Deadshot can start a fight, Clayface tells him to wait a minute since causing a commotion isn't a great idea when you are the new guy. They could have solved this a lot easier if King Shark had come here with them since he's the strongest among them, but he is still sleeping in the cell. So to avoid a confrontation while he can't use his powers, Clayface tries to de-escalate the situation, but the ogres don't understand what he is saying and just punch him across the room instead. After this, all bets are off, so Deadshot flips the table and everyone starts fighting. Despite being up against ogres, the team are much more capable in a fight, so Harley gets on top of the main ogre and starts smacking him around with a bowl, while Peacemaker overpowers two other ogres. By the time the guards get called, the team has taken all the ogres out and are basking in their glory. But this is a prison, so the guards pull out punishment wands and pin them all to the ground, after which they have everyone sent to solitary confinement for causing trouble. Once inside, they find out they aren't alone as there is another human there, and he says his name is Rick Flag. He was sent here on a mission by Amanda, but since the team was sent here as well, it looks like Amanda sent backup after all. The team is confused, so Rick offers to explain what's going on and tells them that they aren't the first team to be sent here. Rick was the leader of a task force whose goal was to make first contact with the people of this world through the portal Amanda had opened, but Deadshot doesn't understand why they would go through all the trouble of going to another world. However, he then remembers that Amanda works for the United States, and where there's oil, the United States will always be there to claim it. So basically, the original team failed, so Amanda sent in a bunch of criminals since no one would care if they died. They still have no choice but to complete the mission, so Peacemaker asks Rick if he knows where the transmitter for the bombs in their necks are located. They need to get there so that they don't end up dead, but since the helicopter is destroyed, they have to assume that the transmitter would be somewhere near the gate that brought them here. Rick offers to show them the way back as long as they help him escape as well, and while the others don't like Rick, they don't have many options if they want to keep their heads. Just then, they hear a stomach rumbling, and it's King Shark who has just woken up from his nap. He says he is hungry, so he is about to eat the others, but at the last second, they manage to convince him that there's a lot more tasty food on the other side of the door, so he just needs to break it down. Shark likes the idea of tasty food, so he does his best to knock the door down, but this attracts the attention of the guards. As Shark finally breaks through the door, the guard tries to use the wand to subdue him, but Deadshot distracts him while Harley steals his wand and smacks him from behind, knocking him into the roof. Harley is surprised by how much force the wand was able to generate, but the thing shatters after a single use, so it's not useful anymore. Now that the guard is knocked out, Clayface walks over to his body and releases the restraints on his wrists. He is now able to use his powers again, and the first thing he does is to free all the other monsters that were trapped here so that they can provide a distraction. And with all the chaos going on, they are able to take out all the guards with the help of the monsters and destroy the prison altogether. Meanwhile, Cecil is heading to the prison at the request of the princess, since she believes enlisting the help of the strange people would be the best way to end the war and get the lives of the people back to normal. Cecil doesn't agree with her choice, but he still chooses to fulfill the princess' request. However, as he approaches the prison, he finds that it has been completely taken over. Meanwhile, on the roof, the team and the monsters are all getting along really well after they helped everyone escape. So as they see Cecil's carriage approaching, they all joke that it's going to take a lot more than that if the kingdom wants to reclaim the prison. As Cecil gets to the front gate, he is confronted by the team, but they still can't understand anything he is saying. Clayface recalls Cecil as the one who sent them to the prison in the first place, and the others recognize him after they see his balding head. Cecil has no idea what they just said, but he knows they are making fun of his hair, so he pulls out his sword and attempts to strike Harley down. However, Shark stops the sword with his teeth and eats it in one bite, but he soon regrets the decision as Cecil recalls the sword and slices open Shark's stomach in the process. Fortunately, Shark begins to glow and the wound in his stomach heals itself, but they are still nowhere near finding a peaceful resolution. Rick comes out and tells everyone to calm down before they do something they'll end up regretting, and he asks Shark to avoid eating any more weapons since it is bad for him. Deadshot doesn't want to back down from a fight, but Rick says there is no need to fight since he can negotiate with Cecil. He has been in this prison a lot longer than the rest of them have, so he has learned a little bit about this world's language from the orcs. Cecil definitely understands what Rick is saying, but every single sentence he speaks is full of insults, so Cecil isn't willing to cooperate. He's just about to attack them when he remembers that the princess personally asked him to acquire their assistance, so he puts his sword away and says he will take them to the castle so they can meet the queen. The group eventually arrives at the castle, and as the queen enters to hear what they have to say, she casts a spell on them so that she can understand what they are saying. Rick speaks up first and thanks the queen for agreeing to meet them, but he has a request to ask of her. The queen sees no reason to listen to the requests of someone who is still her prisoner. However, Rick informs her that he has valuable information that would be useful to her in the war, so all he asks for in return is permission to move around freely. By now, the queen must have realized that the beasts have become increasingly strong recently, but what she doesn't know is that the beasts' newfound strength lies in the fact that their commanders are people from Earth like them. Harley and the others finally piece together what must have happened as Rick says this, so it is likely that Rick's initial team was also made of unwilling convicts, but once they got here, they betrayed Rick and joined up with the Beast Empire. So basically, the whole reason the kingdom is losing this war is because Rick couldn't control his team. The queen has every right to be mad at them for it, but Peacemaker speaks up and says they will do whatever it takes to atone for Rick's mistake and restore peace to her land. But she takes Rick hostage as an insurance policy. Cecil is on board with the idea of letting them fight on the front lines alongside his men, but the queen has made her decision. As Rick is being led away, he tells the others that they had better get the job done. Otherwise, they won't be able to find the transmitter since he is the only one who knows where it is. Now that he's gone, Harley says she's kind of hungry, so she would like to get something to eat, and they should probably get something for Shark before he decides to put them on the menu again. Also, they are going to need the queen to give them their stuff back. Once they've gotten their gear back, they all suit up and head out to the battlefield. But as the battle is raging on, they don't get involved since Cecil had told them that his army can win without their help. Clayface still thinks they should help them since it might improve their relationship with the kingdom, but in all honesty, Deadshot doesn't want to have to deal with the beasts down there. They are insanely strong and they are fighting with no regard for their life, so handling them would be difficult for him. He wonders what kind of training the wolves must have gone through to be fighting like this, but Harley doesn't think they were trained to do any of this. It is much more likely to be brainwashing. That must mean they are dealing with a villain that is skilled at brainwashing people. And if that's the case, then Deadshot knows exactly who they are up against, and the guy used to be an old friend of his, so thinks the guy will listen to him. They all go around the side of the fort and Clayface tries out something new as he touches the walls of the fort and causes a hole to appear in it. The others didn't know he could do this, but since he can destroy the walls will, Deadshot asks if he can just bring the whole fortress down, so they don't have to go through all this effort. Unfortunately, Clayface doesn't think he can do that since there's not enough moisture here. Ever since he got here, he has been able to feel something like magic coursing through his body, and the others must have experienced something similar. Clayface's usual ability is to control the clay within his body, but now he can control any kind of clay. It's still going to take some getting used to, but it's sure to come in handy. They begin fighting their way through the halls of the fort while taking down the wolves one by one, and eventually, they make it up to the roof where the mastermind is hiding. Deadshot calls out to Ratcatcher, but even though Deadshot seems to think they are old friends, Ratcatcher absolutely hates him. Back in prison, Rat would get bullied by the other prisoners a lot for being a rat-loving weirdo, so Deadshot decided to intervene, but in doing so he roasted Rat beyond repair. And from then on, Deadshot would keep pestering Rat no matter where he went, always trying to be helpful, but only ever making things worse. He would give Rat cheese and take his food instead, He would show up while Rat was taking a shit and give him a free but unwanted haircut, and he even started sourcing rat-smashing DVDs for Rat for some reason. So after all the humiliation he has suffered at Deadshot's hands, Rat wants nothing more than to kill him. His original powers only allowed him to control the minds of rats, but in this world he can control any beast he wishes, and there are a lot of them. As the group fights off the wolves, Peacemaker realizes that they need to take out the rat to put an end to this, but as he fires a bullet at Rat, it gets blocked by a nearby wolf. Getting close to Rat will be difficult, so Clayface points out the giant water tanks above them, so Deadshot takes them out and the roof floods with water. Now that there is adequate moisture, Clayface is able to fully control the clay in the castle walls, so he makes a pit below the wolves, causing them to fall several stories below, and now that he has a clear shot, Peacemaker aims straight for Rat's head. However, before the bullet hits its mark, Rat is saved by that samurai girl from earlier, and Harley has a major score to settle with that girl for separating her from Joker. After the damage Clayface did to the tower, the whole thing crumbles to the ground, so Cecil starts yelling at them for destroying everything. Deadshot justifies it by saying Cecil would have lost the battle if they didn't intervene, and all they need to do is rebuild the fort and everything will be as good as new. But for now, they've done their job, so they are going home. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the Queen and her cabinet were watching the battle unfold, and they are all pleased with the outcome, especially Fion, who is still really interested in Harley. At the same time, the samurai has taken Rat to a secluded cave and reminds him that she isn't saving him out of kindness. Their emperor hates incompetence, so if he messes up again, there won't be a next time. Rat is well aware of this, so he doesn't intend to fail on his next mission. After their success in taking back what's left of the fort, the team heads back to the castle to receive their reward, however, as Harley wakes up from a nap and finds that they are still in a cell. It looks like nothing has changed regarding how they are being treated. Rick asks if they really got the job done since the agreement was that reclaiming the fort would earn them their freedom, but Deadshot says they did nothing wrong. Yeah, they may have gone a little overboard and destroyed the fort, but the job was still done. Right now, he is more worried about their bombs since by Peacemaker's count, they've only got 12 hours left before they blow up. Just then, they all notice Fion walking up to them, and while they've never met before, Clayface assumes she must be the princess, so he starts laying on the charm, but Deadshot interrupts him and gets straight to the point by asking Fion when they are going to be released. Fion apologizes, but she has no way of knowing that information. Although she is sure that their recent success in retaking the fort would mean they would be treated well, but it doesn't sound very convincing when they are all still behind bars. Fion then looks over to Harley, and Harley asks what she wants, but Fion can't bring herself to say it. Harley is a little irked by this, so she tells Fion that she noticed how she was staring at her earlier, so if she's got something to say, then she should get it over with. The others ask why Harley is so upset about Fion staring at her, but she can't help it since Fion reminds her of her former self. Just then, Cecil enters the prison with the keys to the cells because the Queen has called for the team, and Deadshot wonders what took so long. We get a flashback to Fion's childhood as she was climbing a roof with some of her friends. The view they got to see was wonderful. Fion was impressed even though her castle is taller, but the kid reminds her that she is disguised as a commoner right now, so she can't talk about her royal status here. Fion apologized and changed the subject to ask if the kid's little brother is feeling better now. The kid says his brother is doing okay, but the price of bread has been hiked up again, and there are no more chimneys in town for him to sweep, so times are tough. Just then, she notices that Cecil is calling for her, so she needs to go home soon or she will get scolded, but before she goes, the kid asks if she knows when the war will end. Fion regrettably can't say for certain. All she knows is that the fighting is happening over by the mountains. Later that day, Fion was getting scolded by the Queen for going into town to play with the commoners. Fion scowls at Cecil, who at the time had a decent haircut, but the Queen informs her that Cecil wasn't the one who switched on her, it was some city guards who recognized her. She reminds Fion that as royalty she has a different duty than that of the peasants, but before she leaves, Fion asks her what the duty of royalty is supposed to be, so the Queen answers that it is to put an end to the war. Unfortunately, the Queen wasn't very successful in ending the war, which inevitably led to the deaths of all of Fion's friends as they got caught up in the violence. Back to the present, Cecil calls Fion to remind her that the War Council meeting is about to begin. Fion apologizes and gets ready to attend, but Cecil reminds her that there is no expectation for her to make an appearance there. Fion knows that, but this is something she wants to do so she can play a part in stopping this war. At the meeting, the council is shown a recording of hundreds of Imperial Beast soldiers marching in for an attack. They all begin to panic at the sight of this, but the Queen calls for everyone to remain calm and asks for a status update. At the moment, the Imperial army is marching towards the plains through the forest. Fortunately, they are moving at a slow pace, but with their large numbers, the guards that have been stationed in the forest won't be enough to handle them. So if nothing is done to change the situation, the Imperial forces will be able to cross the bridge to the kingdom in less than 2 days. That would be a terrible outcome, but while everyone is panicking, Harley speaks up and asks why they are still in shackles when the deal was for them to be freed after they reclaimed the fort. The Queen says they didn't hold up their end of the bargain since they destroyed the entire fort when they were supposed to reclaim it for her, but she'll forget about that for now. Instead, she asks Rick to get up since he had mentioned having useful information about the Empire's senior officers, so she wants to know who was leading the army and how they could possibly manage to maintain control over such a large number of troops. However, before Rick gives her that information, he asks to be informed of how this war started so that he can better understand the situation. So the Queen asks Cecil to explain. The kingdom has been waging war with the Imperial army for many decades now, but the intensity of the war has risen dramatically over the course of the past 6 months. A main factor in this shift is the fact that the elves and beastmen betrayed the kingdom in order to side with the Empire. Rick is surprised to hear this, and in fact, the beastmen that they fought while trying to reclaim the fort were originally subjects of the kingdom. Peacemaker calls them traitors for abandoning their kingdom, but Clayface thinks they might have just gotten fed up with how poorly they were being treated. Rick tells the Queen that he is fairly certain the one who caused the beastmen to betray her is the rat catcher. He had the power to communicate with rats back on Earth, but it's possible that coming to this world granted him the ability to communicate with beasts as well and force his will upon them. The Queen asks if they have any suggestions on how to catch him, but they don't really have any good ideas. And now that he thinks about it, Deadshot wonders why Rick wasn't able to blow the head off Ratcatcher and the other criminals when they went rogue, since Amanda had to have planted bombs in their necks as well. Rick has no idea how it happened, but before he realized what was going on, the bombs in their necks had been defused. That's probably why Amanda set the current team's bombs to go off on a timer. Since the team isn't able to offer any useful insight, the Queen is about to send them back to prison, but that's when Harley suddenly remembers something Joker had told her about hunting rats. She relays the plan to everyone, and they think it's a good idea, but the only problem is that it will require them to not only stop Rat's army, but to also force Ratcatcher up to the front lines so they can attack him, and they just don't have enough people for that. Rick turns to the Queen and asks her if she would be willing to lend him some of her soldiers to ensure the success of this mission, and once it is complete, Rick asks that they be freed. The council members begin to insult Rick for even daring to think they could lend him some soldiers, but Fiona speaks up and says she thinks it would be beneficial to put some trust in these people for the sake of the kingdom. However, she is immediately shut down when the council members ask her if she is willing to take responsibility if Rick ends up getting their soldiers killed for no reason. Cecil adds that it would also be far too reckless since the only knights currently available for battle are the ones who are directly under him, and even all of his knights wouldn't be enough for the plan they have in mind. However, Harley says they don't need any human knights in the first place since she knows where they can find a ton of able-bodied warriors for the mission. A while later, camp is being set up by the destroyed fort when Harley sees the ogres and orcs from prison walking in. She walks up to the ogre to greet him, and he still respects Harley a lot for being able to beat him up, so he agrees to follow her orders. Harley gets on top of a barrel to address the rest of the beasts, and she tells them all that if they work hard in this next battle, they will be freed from the prison, otherwise they'll be sent straight back so they all get pumped. Everything seems to be under control, so Cecil walks away and lets Harley handle the rest. Meanwhile, Rick gives Clayface a job to do, and he's clearly not happy about it, but he still walks off to get it done. While Clayface is doing that, Rick yells at King Shark to get him to stop eating all their food rations, and Peacemaker is just cleaning his gun and not getting involved. Just then, Cecil comes up to Rick to have a chat, and from what he knows about the situation, Rick is a soldier, and the team are a bunch of criminals. So he asks if it doesn't bother him to have to fight alongside such heinous criminals. And of course it bothers him. He would never have chosen to deal with these lunatics if he had a say in the matter, but as a soldier, he is forced to follow orders from his superiors. As night arrives, Clayface returns after getting his job done, and Rick thanks him for his help. Clay structures aren't his specialty, but they'll be sufficient for battle. Now it's time for them to discuss their battle plan, so Rick points to a map to show where they are located, and the barriers Clayface set up, along with the defensive line of ogres and knights, should be enough for them to halt the progress of the Imperial army. Cecil notices that Deadshot is missing, so he asks what he could possibly be up to at a time like this, and he is informed that Deadshot is perched up on the roof as a sniper, so he decides to just let him do his thing up there. At the same time, Clayface asks Cecil if he can tell them about Princess Fiona. Cecil asks why he wants to know all of a sudden, so Clayface explains that it looked like Fiona wanted to ask them something earlier, but she couldn't bring herself to say it, so he wants to know what kind of person she is. Cecil explains that Fiona is a kind-hearted girl, and there's no one in the castle who cares about the people of the kingdom as much as she does. While he is talking, Harley scoffs at her and says Fiona is just a wimp who can't stand up for herself, and Cecil is prepared to square up with Harley for insulting his princess in front of him. However, a moment later, King Shark gets a whiff of the enemy approaching, so they alert the troops that it is time for battle. Cecil says he will head out to command his troops while the others take charge of the ogres, but Harley and the others have no intention of doing any fighting right now. The ogres are perfectly capable of doing it by themselves, and none of them want to deal with the hassle of fighting. As Ratcatcher and his army are approaching, he notices the giant barriers in the middle of the valley and the soldiers stationed behind them, so he realizes that the kingdom must be trying to intercept him. However, he finds the whole thing hilarious because he is confident that he and his obedient puppets can easily overwhelm them. Cecil's soldiers are starting to question if they are really going to be able to win this battle when they are up against so many opponents, but Cecil gets their attention and reminds them they are fighting to protect the lives of the citizens of the kingdom, so even if they have to die in the process, they will defend it with everything they have. Ratcatcher is still holding a grudge against Deadshot, so says he is going to enjoy ripping him limb from limb when he finally finds him. But then a bullet whizzes past him and Ratcatcher ducks to the floor. He realizes Deadshot must have fired a bullet at him, but since he is still alive, he believes Deadshot must have missed. He then orders his beasts to begin the attack, but they all keep ignoring him and standing still. So he tries pushing them to start attacking, but that's when he realizes that his magic staff has been destroyed. Deadshot was aiming for the staff all along, since earlier that day he called a meeting with everyone to discuss a theory he had. He realized that there should be no way Ratcatcher's powers give him full control over Beastmen, so he assumes his power must be coming from the staff he was carrying last time they fought. That's why they set up the barrier and gathered troops to fight, also that they could bait Ratcatcher into raising his staff so that Deadshot could destroy it. And now that he has no control over the beasts anymore, they quickly turn on him for enslaving them. After they are done tearing Ratcatcher to shreds, they all start wondering where they are and what they were doing here. Cecil doesn't know what's going on, but apparently the beasts no longer want to fight, so the battle has been won. And as per the agreement they had with the Queen, they are now free to do whatever they want, so they all leave Sir Rick and get them to the gate and reset their bomb timers. At the same time, the War Council has just been informed of the team's victory, so everyone is happy, all except the Queen, who looks like she has a mix of surprise, rage, and constipation. This was the end of episode 4. Subscribe to not miss the next part.